Good morning. Today we'll be starting with cell signaling. So the first part we'll be doing is the different categories of signaling, and we'll be doing the signaling molecules and the signaling receptors. And the next part is that you have two signaling pathways in your syllabus. One is the RTK pathway and the other the JAK-STAT pathway. Now, when we talk about this topic, basic topic cell signaling, it results from the direct interaction of a cell with its neighbor or from the action of secreted signaling molecule. Now, you can understand that like individuals, we communicate to another individuals by talking. Cells cannot talk among themselves. So how do they communicate with each other? So when we are talking about cellular communication, be it intracellular outside the cell, or be it intracellular, that is inside the cell, or be it intercellular, that is outside the cell, cell to cell, cell signaling is the major way of cellular communication. It is a form of cellular crosstalk. It is a form of crosstalk between molecules within the cells also. So thus, you can understand that as an individual living organism, how vital communication is. You cannot live as an isolated entity in nature. You need to constantly communicate with each other in nature, if you think of yourself. So when you think from the perspective of cell, then imagine how vital this cell signaling process is for a cell. Because via the signaling mechanisms, it not only communicates to another cell, it also helps in communication of various molecules within itself. These are the different books that I have taken reference for. And now we come to the basic principle of cell signaling. When we are talking about cell signaling, the first thing is that there are stimuli. The stimuli can be hormones, neurotransmitters, or growth factors. These stimuli can act on receptors on the cell surface. Later on, you will see some stimuli can directly enter into the via the plasma membrane into the cytoplasm and can interact with cytosolic receptors. So anyhow, whenever there is a stimuli in form of hormones, neurotransmitters, or growth factors, we understand that this stimuli interacts with receptors. The moment there is a ligand receptor binding, remember when we are using the term ligand, I have used the term ligand. That means there is a receptor and this receptor is binding to a specific stimuli. So if there is a receptor for a growth factor, the receptor will bind to a growth factor. So in that case, the growth factor becomes the ligand. So specific stimuli for a specific receptor known as is ligand. So whenever there is this stimuli receptor binding, in most cases, gradually as we go through this subject of cell signaling and as we move on to the topics of JAK-STAT and RTK, you'll realize that there is a conformational change occurring at the level of the receptors. This conformational change is often perceived by molecules present in the cytoplasm. So this first category of molecules that can perceive the conformational change that is occurring within these receptors are the transducers. They perceive the conformational change occurring within the receptors. And they understand that obviously a stimuli has become attached to the receptor and thus the receptor has changed in the manner it has. And this conformational change is perceived by the transducers. They interact with the receptors and then they further transmit the signal downstream. While transmitting the signal downstream, they often amplify the signal. That is, they often involve other molecules telling that this stimuli and receptor has attached. I have perceived the signal, the transducers perceive the signal, and I need multiple pathways to operate simultaneously. So they amplify the signal. So they involve amplifiers. So the signal is amplified. And often the signal is amplified. It might be that in case of a particular signaling pathway, the signal might not be also amplified. So there is a choice. If the signal is amplified, or if not, whatever, the signal then flows downstream to certain molecules which are known as messengers. These messengers then carry the signals further downstream. The messengers can either act locally or at times can diffuse throughout the cell. They move throughout the cell. I'm not saying they do not move outside the cell, they move throughout the cell. So they start activating different molecules at position at different parts of the cell. These messengers then engage sensors, which coupled to the effectors are responsible for activating cellular response. And the cellular response, as you can see, can be varied. It can be cell proliferation, cell differentiation, learning, memory. It's a varied amount of cellular response. So henceforth, from the topics which I'm teaching you today, we are starting with signaling, and then we will gradually move on to cell cycle, cancer, and apoptosis. We'll understand how vital cellular communication is. Because whenever I'll be walking through those topics, you'll realize each topic is requiring huge amount of cellular communication and intracellular signaling to be performed accurately for the cell to function in that defined manner. So this is a very preliminary idea about the basic principle of cell signaling. So it starts with, actually, as you can see, it starts with a stimuli and a receptor binding, and it ends with, finally, as a result of that receptor stimuli binding, a response of the cell generated to the stimuli, thus it had perceived. Then now we are coming to the first part of our cell signaling topic, as I said, categories of cell signaling. This is a very simplified diagram, and this is from Bruce Alberts. So if we look into the categories of cell signaling, you can see, let us categorize first: contact dependent, paracrine, synaptic, endocrine. Let's look into contact dependent first. As the name suggests, you can understand that direct membrane to membrane contact is occurring between two cells. So one cell is expressing a stimuli, and in this case, we'll not call it as a stimuli, we'll now call it as a ligand. Because I think so you've understood what a ligand means. A specific stimuli for a specific receptor. So one cell is expressing the ligand on its cell membrane surface, and the other cell is, via its receptor, is perceiving the ligand, and is then accordingly, the target cell will be accordingly activated. Keep it in mind that the cell bearing the receptors in most cases, invariably in all cases, are activated because the target cell actually have the receptors, and as I said, it is a conformational change in the receptors that help in downward percolation of the signal. So the contact dependent is one cell is expressing a membrane bound signaling molecule or a ligand, and the target cell receptor on attaching itself with that ligand is activated. So that is contact dependent. A lot of immune cells of our body work in this manner. Next comes to paracrine signaling. As you can see, this is one cell. This is another cell. These two are target cells, and this is the cell that is signaling. So it is releasing some signals into the extracellular space, and these signals then move locally and act on neighboring cells, and thereby bringing about their activation. So that is paracrine signaling. A lot of neurotransmitters. You have studied about neurotransmitters carrying signals between nerve cells. So neurotransmitters behave in this manner. They are released from one cell and they bind with the receptors of the target cell and bring about the activation of the target cell. Next, coming to a very specific category of signaling, the synaptic. In your 11-12 syllabus, you have studied synapse. So you can see that in the synaptic signaling, the neurons are transmitting signals electrically along their axons, and here they are releasing neurotransmitters as synapses. So you can see that neurotransmitters are being released at the synapses, which are then recognized by receptors present on the target cell, and accordingly the activation of the target cell is occurring. And finally, you have all heard about the endocrine system, endocrine signaling. So what happens, there's an endocrine cell, it secretes hormones. These hormones are then carried by the blood to the target cell. The target cell have receptors. The hormones bind, so the ligand binds to the receptors, bringing about the activation of the target cell. And classical example is the steroid hormone estrogen, which is produced by the ovary and it stimulates the development and maintenance of the female reproductive system and the secondary sex character. So these are the three, I've showed you four basic categories of signaling. I'll show you another picture of defining the categories of signaling. So once more, the endocrine signaling, endocrine cells releasing hormones, traveling through circulation and binding to receptors on the distant cell. Paracrine signaling, cells are secreting local mediators, local cells, the cell is secreting certain signaling molecules or stimuli, and they are perceived by the neighboring cells. See, there's a difference between endocrine and paracrine. In case of paracrine, the cell, which is the target cell, is distantly located, and the hormones are traveling through circulation. In paracrine secretion or paracrine signaling mechanism, you see the cells are neighboring cells. So one of the cells is secreting the stimuli to the extracellular space and it is perceived by a neighboring cell. Paracrine signaling is often also seen in a lot of cells in our immune system. Then we have autocrine signaling. I didn't talk about the autocrine signaling in the earlier slide. Some cells respond to signaling molecules that they produce themselves. So you can see this cell is producing the signaling molecules. Not only that, it is also producing receptors for the signaling molecules. So these receptors can bind with the signaling molecules and they themselves are activated. Again, we see this kind of autocrine signaling in a lot of immune cells of our body. Immune system, in our immune system of our body, we see autocrine signaling, we see paracrine signaling. And as I was talking about the synaptic signaling, as you can see, neurotransmitter vesicles. This is the synapse you can see here. This is the presynaptic terminal. This is the synaptic cleft. And this is the postsynaptic membrane. So you can see that signaling molecules are being received from the synapse and they are being accepted by the receptors on the target cell. And accordingly, the message to the target cell is sent. So this is another diagram of the various categories of signaling. And this is a characteristic feature of the different cell-to-cell communication. So I have broadly categorized it into autocrine oblique paracrine, nervous, endocrine, and exocrine. And there are 2 to 3 things you should focus. Secretory cell, a various category of cells are involved in autocrine and paracrine. When we are restricted to the signaling of the nervous system, obviously it has to be the tissue of the nervous system, so it is neuronal. When we are talking about the endocrine signaling, it has to be the endocrine organs. And when you're talking about exocrine, you are aware of what exocrine glands with ducts. There are also variety types. Look at the target cell. When you're talking about autocrine or paracrine, most cells in the body. When you're talking about the nervous system, is neuron, muscle, and endocrine cells. When you're talking about the endocrine system, again, endocrine system also, the hormones can activate, the hormones can interact with most cells of the body. And when we are talking about exocrine, it can be sensory and neural secretions. Signal type via autocrine and paracrine chemical. For nervous, it can be electrical and chemical, you are aware, electrical stimuli and chemical stimuli. For endocrine is chemical, most of the signaling molecules are chemical, and for exocrine system also the signaling molecules are chemical. Coming to the distance, only the autocrine and the paracrine signaling system is short, because in autocrine, as I said, a single cell produces signals, also produces its receptors and gets self-activated. So that's short. In case of paracrine, a single cell activates its neighboring cell. So the distance traversed by the signaling molecules is short. As compared to the nervous, exocrine and endocrine, see, in all these cases, the distance traversed is long. However, in case of nervous, it is long intracellularly, that is moving through neurons or across synapses. For endocrine, it can travel through blood. For exocrine also, it can travel through tissue spaces. Transport, the medium through which the signaling molecules are moving. In case of autocrine, paracrine, extracellular. For nervous, synapse. For endocrine system, circulatory. Exocrine, external environment. For example, we have this sweat gland secretion. Sweat is secreted to the external environment. We have this salivary secretion. It's secreted in the mouth. Speed. If you look into the autocrine, paracrine, and nervous, these are high-speed signaling processes. But regarding endocrine and exocrine, when you're talking about endocrine, it is slower. Exocrine, it differs accordingly. Duration of response. For autocrine and nervous, it is short. For endocrine, it has a longer duration. The signaling process stays over. And for exocrine also, it depends, depending on where the secretion is occurring. So that was the basic categories of signaling that we broadly discussed. Now we are moving on to signaling molecules. Let us look into this picture. This picture is a beautiful picture. Cell stimuli, as I said, signaling molecules are nothing but stimulus. They behave as stimuli. Now, cell stimuli are released from cells through different mechanisms. They can be membrane anchored stimulus, as we just now saw in the case of contact dependent signaling, or they can be released into the cytoplasm. So a stimuli can be released into the cytoplasm by ectoderm shedding. So the ectoderm is shed out and can be released into the cytoplasm. The stimuli can be packaged into vesicles and can be released into vesicles and can be released by exocytosis. So there can be membrane anchored stimuli which are released by ectoderm shedding. There can be stimulus formed in the cytoplasm that can pass out across the membrane. So this can pass out across the membrane, and there can be stimuli packaged into vesicles that are released by exocytosis. So whatever way the stimuli are released, now let us look at the different stimuli that are visible in this slide. So the stimuli can be growth factors and cytokines. They can be eicosanoids, nitric oxides, ATP. They can be hormones and neurotransmitters. So we are now having a stimuli. Membrane anchor stimuli, as I just told you, they are contact dependent signaling. So this signaling is also known as juxtacrine signaling. So as you can see, the membrane anchor stimuli on the surface can activate neighboring cells directly. Another thing, some stimuli that are released by a cell can also act on that cell if that cell produces receptors for that stimuli. So we have autocrine signaling here. The stimuli can diffuse into the neighboring cells. So there is this paracrine signaling here, or the stimuli might travel through blood vessels or the circulatory system and act on a distant cell. So we can have endocrine signaling here. So this is how the various stimuli could be related to various basic categories of signaling strategies that we just now studied. Now, talking about the various stimuli we discussed in this slide. So the stimuli can be hydrophobic signaling molecules. The stimuli can be nitric oxide and carbon monoxide. The stimuli can be neurotransmitters. The stimuli can be peptide hormones and growth factors. Stimuli can be eicosanoids and plant hormones. So these are the variety of stimuli that is present. Coming to the first category of stimuli, before moving into nitric oxide and neurotransmitters, uh, let me just give an example of the hydrophobic signaling molecules. Now, these hydrophobic signaling molecules are able to diffuse across the plasma membrane, as you can see. So there are some hydrophobic signaling molecules that are able to directly diffuse out of the plasma membrane. For example, so they can diffuse across the plasma membrane. One of our very classical hydrophobic signaling molecule is the steroid hormones, the thyroid hormones, vitamin D3, and retinoic acid. So these hydrophobic, as you can see, hydrophobic are plasma membrane. If you remember the lipid bilayer, the bilayer is hydrophobic. It's basically having a lipid base. So these hydrophobic signaling molecules can directly move across the plasma membrane. These signaling molecules can bind to the receptors. They can bind to two categories of receptors. One is those receptors which are expressed at the surface of the plasma membrane by the target cells, or they can enter the cell and bind to receptors present on the cytoplasm, which are the cytosolic receptors, or they can bind to certain receptors known as nuclear receptors, and this nuclear receptors then directly enter into the nucleus. So the hydrophobic signaling molecules can bind to three categories of receptors. One, the receptors at the surface of the target cells, the receptors in the cytoplasm, or the nuclear receptors. As these molecules can travel across the plasma membrane, so there is not much to discuss about these molecules further. Now coming to the next category of molecules, that is the nitric oxide and carbon monoxide. So in this particular side, right, left, you can see the nitric oxide. These are some small signaling molecules. These are the structures of some small signaling molecules. These small molecules are involved in sense signaling that includes, as you can see, nitric oxide, neurotransmitters such as acetylcholine and gamma butyric acid, GABA. This is a very famously known neurotransmitter, and some plant hormones such as auxin. Now, this particular figure, as you can see, that is talking about the nitric oxide. Now, the simple gas nitric oxide is a paracrine signaling molecule. Remember, nitric oxide follows a paracrine signaling process. Paracrine signaling molecule in the nervous system, in the immune and the circulatory system. Just like steroid hormones we talked about now, nitric oxide is able to diffuse directly across the plasma membrane of its target cell. However, the molecular basis of how nitric oxide functions and how a steroid or hormone functions is different. Usually, nitric oxide alters the activity of intracellular target enzymes. Now, let's see, this is showing you the synthesis. This picture is showing you the synthesis of nitric oxide. So you can see this is an activated nerve terminal. It is secreting a neurotransmitter acetylcholine, the structure shown here. So it's a small signaling molecule. The acetylcholine is binding to its cognate receptor, and it is activating nitric oxide synthase enzyme. The nitric oxide synthase enzyme is capable of synthesizing nitric oxide from the precursor molecule arginine. Once nitric oxide is synthesized, as I said, it is capable of diffusing out across plasma membrane. So you can see rapid diffusion of nitric oxide across plasma membrane. Enters target cells. It binds to enzyme. Here they are showing it's binding to enzyme guanyl cyclase and bringing about conversion of GTP. It's breaking down GTP to GMP. In the process, some other function is occurring because whenever you break down GTP, energy molecule, a phosphate is released. So some energy is being released here. And ultimately, we see the output is the relaxation of the smooth cell muscle. So this is a very brief example of how nitric oxide occurs. Another similar gaseous molecule that also occurs as a signaling molecule in the nervous system is carbon monoxide. It is closely related to nitric oxide and acts similarly as a neurotransmitter and a mediator of blood vessel dilation. Just like nitric oxide, as we saw here, the synthesis of carbon monoxide in brain cell is stimulated by neurotransmitters. In addition, carbon monoxide can stimulate guanylase cyclase, which also represents the major physiological target of carbon monoxide signaling. So guanyl cyclase is one of the targets of also carbon monoxide signaling. So that was about nitric oxide and carbon monoxide. Coming to neurotransmitters. So when we are talking about neurotransmitters, just a second. Interruptions. So this is basically the electrical and the chemical synapses that have been shown in case of nervous system. So when you're talking about neurotransmitters, as I started with neurotransmitters, they carry signals from neurons. They carry signals between neurons or from neurons to other target cells. So as you can see, so this is a presynaptic neuron. This is a postsynaptic neuron. Now look at this interface. Neurotransmitters are being released and you see there are receptors for these neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters are binding to these receptors and accordingly the postsynaptic neuron is being activated. Now, if we look into the family of neurotransmitters, these are small hydrophilic molecules and hence they need the presence of receptors. They cannot move across the plasma membrane just like that. Including the acetylcholine, the dopamine, you've heard about these names, the epinephrine, serotonin, histamine, glutamate, glycine, and gamma aminobutyric acid. Usually, the release of neurotransmitters are just not released just like that. The release of neurotransmitters is signaled by the arrival of an action potential at the terminus of a neuron. So when an action potential arrives at the terminus of a neuron, the presynaptic neuron is activated, the neurotransmitters are released, as I showed you just now. The neurotransmitters then diffuse across the synaptic cleft and bind to receptors on the target cell. An important point regarding neurotransmitters, some neurotransmitters can also act as hormones. For example, epinephrine, you have heard about epinephrine, functions both as a neurotransmitter and as a hormone produced by the adrenal gland to signal glycogen breakdown in muscle cells. So that was an information regarding epinephrine. And since they are hydrophilic, I just also said that they cannot cross the plasma membrane of the target cells. So the neurotransmitter receptors, we have studied about the plasma membrane receptors. And you remember the neurotransmitter receptors are the ligand-gated ion channels. ligand gated. What ligand, when I am talking about ligand gated, that means these ion channels are specific for a particular ligand. Hopefully you have understood the term ligand by now, a specific stimuli binding to a specific receptor. So these neurotransmitters have ligand gated ion channels such as the acetylcholine receptor. So there is another beautiful picture of neurotransmitter. You can see this picture is very self-explanatory picture. The transmitter is being synthesized and stored in vesicles. You can see here. An action potential arrives through the presynaptic terminal. Depolarization of the presynaptic terminal causes opening of the voltage-gated calcium channels. The moment calcium channels start entering, so this is important, the moment calcium channels start entering, that is influx of calcium channel occurring, the calcium causes fusion of the vesicles. You can see the fusion of the vesicles to the presynaptic membrane. The transmitters are released. The transmitters are binding to the receptor molecules present on the target cell or the postsynaptic neuron in this case. So opening or closing of the postsynaptic channels are occurring. Postsynaptic current, excitatory or inhibitory potential that changes the excitability of the postsynaptic cell. Removal of neurotransmitters by glial uptake or enzymatic degradation. So once the neurotransmitters have done their job, the removal of the neurotransmitters are done by the glial uptake or enzymatic degradation and retrieval of vesicular membrane. And once these vesicles have done their function, the vesicles again retrieved into the presynaptic membrane. So this is how the neurotransmitters move. This is a beautiful example. This is a broad picture of showing you the synaptic signaling movement of neurotransmitters, and this is a comparison of this is another example of endocrine signaling being shown here. Now coming to peptide hormones and growth factors. So when we are talking about hormones, these are the widest variety of signaling molecules in animals. Major signaling molecules of animals are basically proteins in nature. They can range from few hundred amino acids to large peptide molecules. This includes the peptide hormones, neuropeptides, and a huge array of polypeptide growth factors. We'll understand the importance of growth factors when we will be specifically studying the cell cycle topic. Example of the peptide hormone includes insulin, glucagon, and the hormones produced by the pituitary gland, the growth hormone, the follicle stimulating hormone, prolactin, and others. Neuropeptides are secreted from some neurons, such as that includes the endorphins and the enkephalins. So that was about the peptide hormones and growth factors. So this is how the peptide hormones actually act. You can see this is a peptide hormone. It binds to its receptor, and there is this receptor modulation occurring on the cytosolic surface. The receptor was bound to a GTP molecule. The receptor was bound to a G protein. We'll be talking about G protein later on, how it is bound to a G protein molecule. The G protein has 3 parts, alpha, beta, and gamma. Once this receptor hormone binding sets in, there is a conformational change occurring in the G protein, and a subunit of G protein opens from this segment and binds to another structure known as adenyl cyclase, and we can see a downstream signaling cascade occurring, followed by a cellular response. So again, a peptide hormone binds with its receptor. As I said, a change in the G protein complex occurring, and finally, via a downstream cascade, we are seeing cell activation. I'm not moving into the details of the downstream cascade because we'll be doing that one by one when we talk about the RTK pathway. We'll be doing the G protein. When we're doing the receptors, we'll be doing the G protein coupled receptors. While I was talking about some hormones, you remember that I said that some hormones can directly enter the nuclear cytoplasm, or they can directly enter the nucleus. So this is it. This specifically, this is the steroid hormones. See, they do not have any surface receptors. They're directly entering into the cytoplasm, and they can bind with the cytoplasmic receptor. So these are hydrophobic molecules. Once they are bound with the cytoplasmic receptors, these cytoplasmic receptors are activated, and then they can move into the DNA. So that was one category of receptors. Or the other category, I said that some molecules can directly move into the nucleus, where we are having some nuclear receptors. These bind with the nuclear receptors, the hormone receptor complex form, and this hormone receptor complex can bind with certain segments of DNA, which are known as hormone response elements. So this is how also certain hormones, peptide hormones function. Now coming to the eicosanoids, we talked about signaling molecules which are proteins in nature. Eicosanoids are signaling molecules which are lipids in nature. And these molecules are a member of class of lipids called the eicosanoids, which includes the prostaglandins, the prostacyclines, thromboxanes, and leukotrienes. Let's not get into the details of this picture. I just wanted to show you that basically eicosanoids are actually made up from arachidonic acid, which is converted into prostanoids, the green pathway, or they are converted into leukotrienes, the yellow pathway. So we have prostaglandin as one of the eicosanoids, or we have leukotrienes as another category of eicosanoids. Regarding the eicosanoids, just keep it in mind that they act locally. They cannot travel long distance because they are broken very rapidly. And since they are broken very rapidly, therefore they act locally in autocrine or paracrine signaling pathway. So they follow the autocrine or the paracrine signaling pathway. Regarding the synthesis, so that was about eicosanoids, and now let's move on to the last category of signaling molecules for our today's class. There's the plant hormones. You have all studied that the plant hormones are basically divided into the 5 major classes: auxin, gibberellins, cytokinins, abscisic acid, and ethylene. I've showed you a very simple example of how the plant hormones signaling pathways are triggered. So you see there is an auxin response factor present, which can bind with the DNA and can activate auxin target genes. In absence of auxin, this pathway is switched off. So all the target genes for auxin is switched off. The moment there is the presence of auxin, auxin binds with this receptor protein. This auxin receptor complex can then bind with, as you can see, bind with a molecular structure. So we are having a ubiquitous, let's look here. It binds with this molecule, the auxin receptor complex. So auxin receptor complex binds with this transcriptional repressor. Let me get over this once more. So in absence of auxin, this is the auxin response factor, and the yellow one is the transcriptional repressor. So in absence of auxin, this repressor molecule is preventing the ARF, auxin response factor, to transcribe the target genes. Moment there is this auxin receptor protein, it binds with auxin, the receptor protein is activated, and this complex and this receptor auxin protein complex binds with this transcriptional repressor. You can see it is bound with the yellow part. As a result of this auxin receptor complex binding to that yellow part, the auxin response factor is free. So the auxin response factor is free. It is now active. It can bind with the DNA and it can activate the transcription of all the target genes that are to be activated when the auxin is perceived by a plant cell. Meanwhile, on the other hand, simultaneously, since the auxin receptor complex has removed the transcriptional repressor, this total repressor auxin complex is then targeted by a group of proteins in the cell known as ubiquitin ligase. These proteins then help in degradation of the auxin transcriptional repressor complex. So this is a very simplified diagrammatic representation of how the plant hormones work. So with this, we come to the end of today's class where we discussed the basic categories of signaling, and we also discussed the variety of signaling molecules and their very basic ways of which they can, examples of the signaling molecules and the very basic ways in which they can activate the signaling cascade in a target cell.